Well, hello, everybody. And as you know, I am the executive director of the Grand River Council on Aging, and I had the pleasure of developing this presentation for the Municipal Retirees Organization of Ontario, their Housing Support for Seniors Committee, which is very active in looking at all of the housing issues for older residents in Ontario. So I really thank them for that opportunity. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our community and how it fits in Ontario. And as you know, the city of Brantford and the county of Brant are recognized as age-friendly communities by the World Health Organization, and that is impacting all the work that their housing planning has to take into consideration for the future. As it relates to what do they have right now, what's existing, and what will be needed as the community continues to grow and the people in it continue to age. And understanding that the residents live in private homes, they're in condos, they're in apartments of all kinds, retirement communities, and long-term care. And they include municipal-owned affordable social housing options. And they live in different neighborhoods where the people live, where their roads are taking them back and forth, what the utilities are, garbage collection, whatnot, their access to amenities, their shopping, the buildings. In August of 2023, you might be interested in knowing that the province announced that Brantford was leading the pack in Ontario in building new housing, and it's still doing it today. Municipal operating plans are always being worked on for 50 years ahead of time. And so for our community and the rest of the communities in Ontario, they're looking at always what will they need in the future as people age. So having said that, let me just take you to what the Grand River Council on Aging really is and what it's all about. We are a registered charitable nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to encouraging the development of an age-friendly, what we call community culture. And we're not old people for old people. We're actually residents that live in the community, have lived experience, and we share our lived experience with all assets or with people, organizations that are planning for resources for the benefit of the entire community. So we like to say we are sharing our experience as the municipality's plan for everyone from 5 to 105. And if you didn't know, councils on aging represent the voices of the residents, not the municipality, the residents that live in it. And in Ontario, there are 11 member organizations that make up the Ontario Association of Councils on Aging. There's Cambridge, and it works very closely with Kitchener and Waterloo. Grand River, which is us, we have 4 municipalities, the city of Brantford, the county of Brant, 6 nations of the Grand River, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Grey Bruce has 17 municipalities. Halton Region has 4. Hamilton has 5. Kingston has 2. Niagara has 12. Ottawa has 2. Peel has 3. Toronto has what they 6 boroughs. Do you know that Toronto has 164 neighborhoods plus? And so you can imagine what the planning has to go. It has to be taken into consideration there. And then we have Windsor, Essex with 2. So there are a total of 58 communities, municipalities in the province of Ontario that are represented by the 11 councils on aging. And the municipal response to age-friendly community planning is extremely important, and that's where our voice comes in. So let's just look at that community, no matter where it is in Ontario. But there is differences that are going to be in each of the municipalities. For instance, ethnicity. In Brantford and Brant, we have 150 countries represented, being of new and or historic countries that have been here. They have different beliefs, they have different faiths, their experience is different, their family traditions are different. And of course, if we look at our community in particular, we have the Indigenous community that also has an impact, and they've always been here. And so it doesn't matter where you are in Ontario, you're going to have difference in these. And then if you look at the language that is spoken, well, we have 83 first languages in our community where people at the breakfast table are speaking something different than English. And then if you look at the Indigenous languages across Canada, did you know there are 70 different Indigenous languages, and we have a good number of them right here in Six Nations. If you look at the financial aspects of the people that live in our community, they're all ages, of course, and they go all the way from poverty to excess in wealth. So they all have the same issues, though, when it comes to the impacts of the daily living. All aspects of daily living hit all ages. If you look at social, our systems and services are different everywhere in Ontario, depending on the makeup of the population. And then if you look at what they're demanding them to be, they are to be inclusive and they are to allow people to participate. We do a very good job in Brantford Brant of working to keep inclusivity considered in all aspects of social participation. If you look at the education of all of our residents, there's a vast difference, all the way from formal to not having finished high school, or sometimes, depending where they came from, no education. And then if you look at family, their intergenerational practices are all different. And then they have the families that have become disconnected for whatever reason or broken. When I say disconnected, I mean you have grandparents here and children in Vancouver. Or there may be broken relationships. And then the geographical differences that every municipality has to plan for, east, west, north, and south. Even in our own community, there is a difference. And if you look at Ontario and you look at Canada and you look at the rest of the world, and you wonder where all these people that we have living here, where did they come from? So there are those people that have their experience. And then, of course, with age, the languages between the generations, which leads to confusion quite often as to what people are talking about. What's important to know is that all of us, everyone needs a home. We're all people with lived experience. And depending on our age, that just depends on how many years we've got of lived experience. But we're not alone. Everybody is aging. So, whoops, I didn't, there we go. Um, Age versus mobility. Of course, age impacts our life every day. You've all heard me say this, the go, go, slow, go, no go, but it's quite new when I'm doing the presentation to other groups. And I just will say one more time. It is the mobility that impacts our lives every day. Of course, age does. But if we are slow go and having to think about how we're going to get someplace, whether that be a mom with children in tow or somebody that's 25 and had a ski accident, or whether it's somebody with a chronic illness, the consideration that has to go into how they're going to plan to get somewhere and what's going to happen when they get there can be quite considerate. Whereas opposed to no go, they're not going anywhere. But they still need to have services that are open to go, go, and slow go. We all have to eat. We all have to live somewhere. But instead of going out for the no go, all those services have to come to them. So the everything has to be supplied to them. So when it comes to then looking at the aspects of daily living, we as the Grand River Council on Aging encourage people to use an age-friendly filter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But what's important to know is that we look at all the aspects of daily living for as the mobility changes. Here we have a graph that everybody that I ever speak to find quite helpful because it visually shows from infancy up to older age. And when you're looking at planning, they have to think about changes. Is it going to be comfortable? Is safety a problem? Is visibility or noise? Are they going to have an impact? These are all things that people that are planning for in a municipality have to think about as they're planning for things. It doesn't matter whether it's in a municipality, it could be a business, could be an organization, it can be a family. So let's look at the factual implications of the aging population. First of all, older adults versus seniors. And as you all know, we do not use the word seniors unless we're talking about the 65 plus, because that's the government term for seniors. We talk about the older adults. That's because we've been told by in research and people that we've talked to gathering information is that they didn't want to be called seniors. they want to be called, first of all, elders, and because it is a title of respect worldwide, for experience gained, wisdom gained through experience. But we've all changed in the last 5 years. Now it's older adults. Did you know that in 2030, it was projected that 33% of the Canadian population would be 55 plus? Well, that's as a result of the life expectancy, which was 68 in 1950. And in 2050, 30 years from now, the females are going to be living to 90 and to 85. That's the projection. But you can know today that that is already being attained. What's interesting is that in Brant right now, the 55 plus represent 37.1% of our population. That's a big number. 92% of seniors, quote, in this case, seniors, 65 plus, live on their own. They're in homes, they're in condos, they're in apartments, and they all want to age in place. They don't want to move, and they want to stay right where they are. So the question is, what will it take to be able to stay in place? And so we ask them, what should be considered when planning for the future? And we've asked in a couple of several different stages. We started off back in 2008. We published a master aging plan that we went and asked the community what needed to be thought about in planning for the future. And we came up with 99 suggestions from 63 participants, but only 8 related to housing. We went back in 2017, a 2-year process, to find out of all the things that were in the master aging plan, what had been implemented, what worked, and what should be considered. This time, we had 70 housing participants themselves, 63 for the whole thing the first time, 70 for housing the second time. And there were 628 suggestions, but the housing represented 135. In the city of Brantford and the county of Brant, the result of all that was that they actually then applied to the World Health Organization for recognition as age-friendly communities and committed to planning for the future to make the age-friendly communities. That happened in 2018. So, what were the issues that these people identified in those 135 suggestions? What did they say? They talked about living longer and realized that, okay, I might need to get supportive services. Living longer, I want to stay in the same place. That's ended up with what we call naturally occurring retirement communities, where people have moved into perhaps an apartment building or a neighborhood when they were in their 40s or 50s, and they're still there today, and they want to stay there. And how can they do that? Transportation options. They knew that they'd have to consider transportation. If they couldn't drive anymore, how would they get to where they want to go? Cognitive challenges. What happens if there's something that impacts their ability to think, and what would be required, technology or medical, to help them? What if they had to downsize? And oh my gosh, what would renovations be like if they actually stayed in their homes? And then, of course, they recognize that intergenerational issues might be a problem within their families. And when it came to infrastructure, they talked about the fact that all the buildings and things that were related to apartment buildings and whatnot, well, the majority of them were built long before today's long-term living. And so there's such a housing shortage that more things have to be built, but there's a lack of understanding out there amongst all of them and everybody in the community about what housing options are and what future planning should be. And overall, they identified that there had to be something that when people were building something new, they should be planning to build for the future. And if they're renovating, they should make it happen for the future. So we then decided, okay, let's try a case study. Let's take all of this and ask some questions. Why do we want to stay where we are? What's coming up to make it easier for us to stay? And what's required for a homeowner to stay versus a rental? And what did those results come up with? And what is the conclusion? So to answer the question of why do we want to age in place, The question, whoops, here comes my tuning. Why do we want to age in place? First of all, they didn't want to move emotionally because there's a physical stress of moving as it relates to where they're going to go. Do they have to downsize? What are the logistics? What are the physical things? And there's a real fear of losing their independence by having to move to someplace new because it results in an anxiety that builds as a result of leaving what they call their home. And it meant meeting new neighbors in a new community, whether that be in the same city or whether that mean going somewhere else. And the emotional ties that they've had with all their friends and their neighbors are impacted, and there's real fear of unknown. So those are the reasons why everybody wanted to stay in place. So the next question was, well, okay, what could make it easier to stay in place? And we're all familiar with all the AI types of things that have come into being, the voice activated programmable devices that can be used to control climate, lock doors, change lighting. There's security systems, of course, with the surveillance opportunities and motion detectors and remote monitoring. And there's voice activated assistants. You can ask a question, and if somebody has uh, what do I want to say, a visual problem, they can ask the question and have it heard. And if they have a hearing problem, they can ask questions and have it written. There are the wearable personal health devices that monitor health. There is the home healthcare systems that are available, like the paramedic services that go to apartment buildings to do checkups, and the personal support workers that are available through businesses to go to homes. And then there's the home delivery products and services, the drugstores and the grocery stores and Amazon. So there's all these things that can be used to make it easier to stay at home. Everybody wanted appropriate housing, accessible housing, affordable housing, and available housing. The 4 Ds of housing, they kept coming up over and over again, which led to, okay, all those things are being considered. What else might be needed to stay? Well, they might have to have an internal house cleaning service. Maybe they're going to have external maintenance to pay to get the grass cut and the snow shoveled and the eavesdrops cleaned. Maybe they're going to need personal care to help with health issues. Maybe food preparation will be an issue as to whether somebody comes in and does it or whether they take advantage of the food preparation businesses. Good safety practices as it relates to lighting and the entrances and the getting around within their home. The transportation options as to how to get to doctors and to shopping or people coming to them. Um, Accessibility renovations, if they're going to stay in their home, what would be involved? And that could be a bathroom fixtures, it's going to be stairs, hallways, cupboards. It went on and on. And the most important thing was income, sufficient income, which has become a major problem with the older population because they are on fixed incomes. And depending on the profession or the field that they worked in, some were very fortunate that they had good pensions. And others were not as fortunate because they came from a population that didn't have the opportunity to have pension plans. So let me go to the next one. So the cost of staying. Well, then they got talking about the various things that would be costly. If they have to put something into their bathrooms or showers, the cost of that. Will a stair lift be required if it's a 2-story building, home? What about the hallways and the door widths? Is enough room for a wheelchair or walker? What about access to the cupboards or the sinks? Reaching below or above? Below could be a problem if they're in a wheelchair. Above could be a problem if they're in a wheelchair or if they're short. Door handles. Would door handles have to be changed so that they can turn them? And that relates to the plumbing fixtures as well. The front and rear entrance. Do they have ramps? Do they need ramps? Are there handles? Are there railings? And then, of course, the purchase of services that we talked about in the previous slide. So it could be very costly to stay where they're in their own home. So they looked at, okay, what would it cost? What would it come to? And they took two sides. If they were owning a home and wanted to and had to move, then they were going to have to pay for real estate fees, legal fees, land transfer rights, all those things that relate, as well as the moving expenses, the relocation expenses that relates to hydro and water. That same thing applied to the renting. It now had first and last payments instead of all those fees, but they also had the same moving costs and relocation expenses and the potential additional costs that might be required to make the apartment or the home saleable, repairs that might be required, painting before and after the move, and also related to the types of things that might have to be done in a rental facility. And then, of course, there is the new furniture, draperies, redecorating, if what they have doesn't fit the new location. So the implications of all this was two. There were two of them. One was that they all wanted to have an age-appropriate, accessible facility of whatever nature to go to if they had to move. And if health necessitates it, the long-term care would be the second move. And so it was really recognized that they really had to research all their options as it related to what they did. And that's what led the Grand River Council on Aging to recognize that we needed to publish a housing guide for seniors that includes checklists for helping them make informed decision making. And for you as a committee now that you'll understand where all those things that were identified ended up being captured for the housing guide. So having said that, here are the conclusions. The population, actually, there will be continue to be a higher percentage of older adults living longer as the population continues to grow and age, and they all want to age in place. So for the future, it's recommended that all new buildings should include accessibility and accessible and adaptable features so that all ages can choose their housing without having to move or bear the cost of renovations at a later date, and perhaps even forestall moving to alternate living facilities. The residents, people will safely age in place with respect of their family and their friends if it is considered that the accessibility and adaptability was going to be available. They just kept reporting that that's what would allow them to safely age in place and with respect and social inclusion that they are used to in the existing community where they live. And so the result is that it was recommended that optimal universal design be optimized in opportunities for health, participation, and security as things are built for the future or renovated for the future. And that then would enhance the quality of life for people as they age, everyone in the community from 5 to 105. And that, thank you, is the end of the presentation. We will now